So good morning and welcome to Broker Briefing, Australia's premier digital platform for brokers and investors, live streaming video presentations from ASX listed companies. I'm Jane Morgan and thank you for joining me today for our November Mining and Resources Investor Webinar. Live streaming across Zoom, YouTube, brokerbriefing.com, Twitter and Facebook. So today we'll be joined by four companies: Far East Gold, OD6 Metals, Nimy Resources and Tombola Gold. So up first, we are joined by Far East Gold with the ticker code FEG, a company focused on its advanced copper gold projects in Indonesia and Australia. To tell us more, I'm joined by Chairman Paul Walker. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Jane. Thanks very much for having me.
Let me just bring up your presentation.
Excellent. So yes, next slide, please, Jane. So usual disclaimer. So in summary, for people who don't know Far East Gold, we have a portfolio of 6 projects. 3 are located in Indonesia and 3 are in Australia, and they're very advanced copper and gold projects. Before we came along, and since we've been working on them, about $50 million has been spent on exploration to date. We have a really good, strong track record of mine development and operation both in Australia and Indonesia. And between our board and management, we've managed to raise over $1 billion for mine operations in Indonesia alone for other projects. So fairly confident with the jurisdiction and comfortable with how to take a project in a land of a huge opportunity in Indonesia and progress them into operation development and production. Across our projects, more than 45,000 metres of drillings happened. We listed in March this year, went to raise 8 to 12. We raised just under 12 million. As of today, we have a market cap of about $130 million. All of our projects are well advanced to the next stage of exploration. Next slide, please, Jane. Our locations, so 3 of our projects located on the Sunda Magmatic Arc up in Indonesia, and 3 are located in Queensland, 2 in the Drummond Basin and 1 on the Connors Arc. Next slide. This gives a bit of a snapshot of the various stages of our projects in one small hit. They range from sort of nearly 2,000 hectares up to 24,000 plus hectares, and they range from early stage exploration in one of our projects in Queensland through to advanced resource definition in one of our projects in Indonesia. Has 1 million ounces of gold resource estimate, 190 million pounds of copper. And another one of our projects actually has a mining license, so theoretically we could be developing a mine tomorrow on that project. So quite a broad cross-section of early stage through to advanced near-term production projects. Next slide. So this is a map that overviews our 3 Indonesian projects, Woyla, Wonogiri and Trenggalek. Now, Woyla, we consider that to be our flagship project, and about half of the money we've raised is going into Woyla's exploration. And the reason why we're doing that is we saw that as probably the best undrilled project in Southeast Asia, and the best opportunity for value uplift for our shareholders by focusing on advanced exploration in that project. Trenggalek is also quite interesting, and so is Wonogiri. As I said, Wonogiri has 8 million ounces gold resource estimate. They both all sit on the Sunda Magmatic Arc. It hosts a number of world-class tier 1 projects, and generally speaking, it's mostly underexplored. Next slide. The Woyla project that we have, it's a 24,000 hectare contract of work, 6th generation contract of work, which is a particular type of tenure that's issued to mining companies in Indonesia. The very first contract of work that was issued in Indonesia was for the Freeport mine, which is the 3rd largest gold mine in the world. And the 6th generation contract of work that we hold is only about one of 20 in the country for this type of tenure for mineral development and operation. What's good about it? It gives us, once we start into production, we have a 30-year mine life that we can extend for a further 2 10-year periods, so potentially a 50-year tenure under that contract of work. And it's generally considered the most secure form of tenure that you can have in Indonesia. This project's been kicking along for 25 years in the early stage exploration phase. Barrick had it back in the early 90s, and then Newcrest had it. Neither of those companies could progress beyond early stage exploration. They were constrained and they couldn't do drilling. We've taken the work that they've done and expanded upon it, and we've defined 13,000 metres of low sulfidation epithermal vein systems and a defined and mapped strike length of 13 kilometres, spread across 4 separate prospect areas. What's been really encouraging is the assay of rock samples that have been taken from artisanal mining adits and at depth have all the prospect areas have returned bonanza grade mineralization in terms of gold grades of up to 119 grams a ton in Anak Perak, and silver of about nearly 1,200 grams per ton in another one of the prospects of low impact. Now, why Newcrest liked this project? They saw similar structural characteristics in terms of coliform and crustiform banding, as well as gingroo banding across the prospects where they did their early stage exploration that was similar to their other project that they had in Indonesia called Gosowong, which was a 6 million ounce, 20 gram per ton average grade mine that has excited them and excites us in terms of the similarities from a textural structural perspective. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are 4 distinct epithermal vein systems in this project. There's also 3 distinct magnetic anomalies for porphyry in terms of expanding this project once we've gone through the epithermal phase. The strike lengths, as you can see on the map on the right-hand side, Anak Perak is about 4.7 kilometers long. And then we have the 3 other defined and mapped strike systems. We've currently finished some IP survey work in Rek Rinti that extends towards the lower impact vein system. And one of the things we're seeing is that by the geophysics, the strike system is extending towards there. And our hypothesis is we'll do some further testing that all of these 3 systems, Rek Rinti, lower impact, lower Rek, actually join together. So it becomes a much larger complex system of a camp of vein systems within the tenement. Just to give you an idea of the scale of what we're talking about, you see there's a little colourful footprint on the right-hand side. That's the size of the footprint of the Gosowong project, which was the 6 million ounce, 20 plus grams a ton project that Newcrest had, which, as I say, they saw similarities in the textures here in Woyla to that one. But that just gives you an idea of the scale of the vein system we're playing with here. Next slide, please. We have been really successful since we with progressing this project since we got involved in it a few years ago. We were able to downgrade about 7,700 hectares of the 24,000 hectare project from its forestry status to enable drilling to occur. We were then given the environmental authority, and then we were given the borrow use license. So we started drilling for the first time in the history of the project at the end of September. Now, we've defined our first phase of drilling is an 18-hole program which spreads across 900 meters of the 4.7 kilometer strike length in Anak Perak. We have a second phase, which is a further 16 holes, which will take it to about 1.7 kilometers of that 4.7 kilometer strike length. And we started on the 13th of October drilling in the Rek Rinti prospect. So we now have three rigs operating across the tenement, focusing on 2 separate prospect areas. As of today, we've completed 13 of the 18 holes, which accounts for about 600 meters of the 4.7 kilometer strike length. And as of 3 days ago, 8 lots of samples had been cut and sent to the laboratory. So we're working through what we're seeing there, and so far we've been really encouraged. Every one of the holes that we've drilled, the observations are showing visible quartz breccia vein systems, really interesting base metal mineralization that we're observing from the core samples, but quite distinct mineralization in the various zones. So looking forward to getting a better understanding once we get the assays back as to what this means with respect to our first phase of drilling. Next slide, please. There's some examples of the core samples from some of the first holes that we've drilled. What quite interesting quartz mineralization that we're seeing across every one of the holes. In fact, the vein widths that we're seeing have been pretty much what our geophysics surveys we expected to see. So we're seeing up to true vein width of about 25 to 30 meters wide in parts. So it's quite encouraging in terms of the size and scale of this system. Next slide, please. Our second focus project is also in Indonesia. It's called Trenggalek. This is a 13,000 hectare project. It's an IUPOP, which is an operation and production mining permit, so we could theoretically build a mine. It's been identified by the Indonesian government as one of the top 3 greenfield gold projects in the country, and we're getting a lot of support from the Indonesian government to try and progress our projects, particularly Trenggalek and Woyla. What we like about it, you can see the map on the bottom left-hand side. You can see Trenggalek, and to the right, you can see a project called Tujuh Bukit. Tujuh Bukit displays similar sort of magnetic signature, similar volcanic center 5.6 kilometres across to Trenggalek and Tujuh Bukit, and similar structural features in the samples that have been taken. And so we see a lot of encouraging similarities between our project and Tujuh Bukit, which has a resource estimate of 30 million ounces of gold and 19 billion pounds of copper. Lots of exploration been done on Trenggalek, nearly 18,000 meters of drilling, nearly 4,000 kilometers of airborne mag work. The focus that's been done in the past has been on an epithermal prospect, which is where the permit allows the mine to develop. From our perspective, that's actually the least interesting part of this project. And we've been able to downgrade again some forestry areas to enable drilling to occur on porphyry prospects that exist within the tenement. We're in the process of getting the final borrow use license to enable that drilling to take place before we go and drill there. So we actually want to go hunt the big porphyry copper play in that space rather than focusing on the work that's been previously done in the epithermal area. Next slide, please. Our last project, which is where it all started for us, is Wanagiri. It's a fairly shallow sub-outcropping porphyry, million ounces of gold, resource estimate 190 million pounds of copper. We've just in the process of finalising an updated scoping study for this project. Previous vendors had a scoping study done back in 2016 when gold was $1,300 an ounce and copper was 5,500 a tonne. So we're working through the cost inputs and the cash flow modelling for that. So we're hoping to be able to release the results of that scoping study very shortly. What we like about this project is it is a fairly inexpensive CapEx near-term development opportunity, which makes a very interesting element to a junior exploration company's portfolio. Next slide, please. We also have 3 projects in Queensland. Now, we did this for a strategic reason. A lot of junior exploration companies who go and try and do work in Indonesia have had challenges. We think we have the team who's got experience in Indonesia to manage and overcome those challenges that may present themselves along the way. But we're also mindful that every project will have issues, and there may be issues which can potentially delay a project. So having 3 projects in a relatively simple area of Queensland gave us an operational jurisdictional hedge, which we thought was strategically important for our business. Now, I'll just quickly run through next slide. Hill 212 is a fairly straightforward low sulfidation epithermal vein system. We've identified about 10,000 meters of structure, but only about 2,500 meters of that has been mapped. We've just finished an 11-hole, 2,100 meter drilling program, RC drilling. That's on top of the previous 9 holes that have been done. We went to depths of nearly 400 meters in some of the holes. The purpose of that was to get a better understanding of the structure. Like we have a theoretical model that this could be something similar to a Virinancy type deposit. So we've gone and done drilling within some outcroppings, some geophysics areas, and some deeper areas near the previous holes to get an understanding of what the mineralogy looks like, to see what next exploration be justified on this tenement. Next slide, please. Bluegrass Creek, that adjoins directly to our tenement, Hill 212, but also the Mount Coolin tenement, which is owned by GBM Resources, ASX code GBZ. GBM just announced a $25 million farming agreement with Newcrest for that Mount Coolin project, and that they're our direct neighbours. Now, we see Bluegrass Creek and Hill 212 as effectively the same project, and we see from indications of Astra spectral survey work that the vein system extends on a northeast trend from Hill 212 up into Bluegrass Creek. Next slide, please. And now our last project, which we're really excited about, is Mount Clark West. It's a copper gold porphyry prospect. We've just finished deep ground penetrating geophysics work called the MIMDAS geophysics survey. That went down depths of beyond 700 meters. We're in the process of working through the outcome of that work to define an exploration target, which will be a bulk tonnage porphyry prospect. And we're in the process of working through all that so we can release that shortly to the market about what we've seen from the outcome of this very exciting geophysics work, which is built upon the magnetic work and the soil sampling of geochem and drilling that's previously been done on the site. So really excited about what we're seeing there. Next slide, please. One other thing that I think we're really proud of from a company, we were admitted to the United Nations Global Compact at the beginning of this year in March. And in doing that, we became the first junior listed Australian exploration company, either in Australia or Indonesia, to be accepted in the United Nations Global Compact, which means that we've agreed to align our business strategy and operations with the 10 principles on human rights, labour rights, the environment and anti-corruption, and then promote sustainable development goals. Every year we have to report on how we're going and implementing those strategies and operations, but we also get access to roundtable plenary sessions and get an ability to set up from day one best practice in terms of sustainability. Next slide, please. So that's Far East Gold in a snapshot. In terms of our projects, most of our capital is being spent in Indonesia because we see we have potentially 2 tier 1 projects in our portfolio in Wonogiri and Trenggalek. We have a near-term development opportunity in Wardo and Trenggalek, and we have a near-term development opportunity in Wonogiri. And then we have 3 really interesting and highly prospective projects in the Drummond Basin and Conazark in Queensland. Thank you.
Paul, thank you for the great presentation. You've got a certainly very interesting portfolio of projects there. We've had a few questions come through, so let me jump into them. So given core samples have been sent to the lab in Jakarta, what's the strategy of releasing your drill results for Woyla, especially given that the 2 rigs are now drilling at Anak Perak?
Yes. So our plan is to get an understanding of what we're seeing with the core samples, seeing whether there's consistent mineralization across the core, to see whether once we have an adequate number of assays back, it's representative of what we're seeing. So at the moment, we're seeing quite distinct mineralization across each location. So we've only actually drilled about 500 meters of the 4.7 kilometers, and we're seeing quite distinct mineralization. So we're being careful and probably conservative to make sure that we don't jump the gun too quickly with some results on say 2 or 3 holes, whilst getting subtly different views of other core samples coming through. So, pretty happy that we're 13 holes into an 18-hole first phase program. So, even if we wait for the whole program to be done, it won't be too far away.
Thanks. Sorry, Paul, you just actually answered my next question, but I think probably another one. So in addition to the results that are coming through, what else can shareholders look forward to over the next sort of 3 to 6 months?
Oh, okay. So obviously, the big news for us is the definition of an exploration target in Mount Clark West, which is, we're really excited about what people will see in that, because it's quite interesting in terms of the scale and size of the porphyry prospect we'll be targeting. The next news for us, obviously, in the next short term, releasing the scoping study. We've also just engaged people to upgrade the feasibility study on Wonogiri. So, early next year, we're talking sort of PFS type reporting. So, getting all of the pieces in place to decide how we monetize and capitalize a development and operation of the Wonogiri asset.
Wonderful. Well, Paul, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for the great presentation, and a copy of today's recording will be available online in the coming days. But thank you again.
Thanks.
So next up, we have a presentation from OD6 Metals with the ticker code OD6, a company focused on Australian rare earth metals for green technologies. To tell us more, today I'm joined by MD and CEO Brett Hazelden. Hello, Brett.
Hello. Thanks for everyone's time.
Let me bring up your presentation.
So first slide there is just a bit of a location slide. So we're located in Western Australia there, just above Esperance. So it gives you a bit of location. If we go to the next slide, past that one. So in terms of the tenements, we've got 2 main projects, Splinter Rock Project and the Grass Patch Project. Both of them are as big as the Australian Capital Territory in size, so massive type of areas. Both are prospective for clay-hosted rare earths, and they have been found on these tenements in the past. Of importance there is we're also very close to Esperance, sealed roads, and obviously what we're looking for is rare earths, but in particular neodymium and praseodymium. So next slide. So what's driving these? There's a big for these. So we're going from virtually 50,000 to 250,000 tonnes over the next 20 years in terms of demand. And that demand's really coming from electric vehicles using about 2 kilograms per vehicle and 400 kilograms per wind turbine as well. So there's bigger compound annual growth there. Next slide. In terms of what the guys are forecasting out there, there's a big shortage that's been forecast out over the next 20 years. So massive demand for new mines to come on, which we can see on the next slide. So currently China and Myanmar are the major suppliers of these type of materials into the market, with Lynas really being the only existing one outside in Australia, along with Main Peak in America. So there's probably need for another 10 to 12 new NdPr/rare earth mines going forward. So Australia is well positioned to actually get a whole heap of mines into production. Next slide, please. Importantly as well, green obviously is out there in terms of, is it going to be green rare earth potential? There is wind in there in Esperance, there's solar, and we've also got Twiggy out there looking at these Fortescue Future Metals, or Industries I should say, looking to develop a hydrogen facility down there as well. So we do have that future ability there to look as a green rare earth producer. Next slide, please. So a little bit on the project itself, Splinter Rock, we're just going to focus on today. So there was historic high-grade intercepts that ran across a 30-kilometre traverse about 10 to 15 years ago. Rare earths haven't been sexy sort of since then, so they've these areas were dropped. We've picked them up. They were vacant ground land. We've reviewed all the historic data in the areas. So we've got an area that's sort of 30 kilometres by 60 kilometres with clays and with some historic drilling for rare earths in there as well. They've shown good grades. So it's one of the largest known clay target areas that Australia's actually got at the moment. Next slide. So in terms of that previous slide there, this is the cross-section across that 30 kilometres. And you can see on this slide, there's various intersections that have hit between 10 to 30 metres in thickness of up to 1,000 to 2,000 ppm trio. So they're really good grades in terms of clay, rare earths. And you can see there cut-off grades of greater than 300 ppm in red and 750 ppm in purple there. So there's plenty of areas there to target. Those drill holes were 2 to 4 kilometres apart. We've just done a drilling program to infill those drill holes effectively, or infill that line to understand that in more detail, which we can see on the next slide. So the picture on the right, or the figure on the right, that shows you the drill program we've just completed in terms of drill holes and also the depths that they went to. Gives you a bit of a proxy for where the clays are, or how deep some of these clays are. And you can also see here in pink, the big pink blobs are the granites, and the small pink blobs are the outcropping granites and subgranites in the area as well. So effectively what we're looking at here is a historic granite that's been an iceberg, it's been weathered off, and the clays are what has the weathering. And then we're obviously targeting the clays that then hold the rare earths that have been dissolved over a couple of billion years. So we've just completed the drilling. We're imminent to announce some drill results probably early next week at this stage. So it's a good time to be considering the company from that perspective. Next slide. We've also been doing some work with CSIRO. So there's some white lines there that you can see, 3 white lines. This is all historic aeromag or electromag works that were done by Australian Geoscience. And so we've had CSIRO reprocess those lines, and you can see there in the middle SAC 217 and the yellow line that refers to. That yellow line is then in the figure, which is in cross-section on the bottom right-hand corner there. It clearly delineates the granites in green, being obviously what was the original source rocks. And then you can see the clay areas in the orange and the red outlines there. So there's an 8 kilometre zone there that looks to be all clays. There's areas that have very close to near surface, so little bits of blue just on top of it, and areas that have a little bit deeper cover. So what it's been able to identify for us is, going forward, where do we want to target our drill holes based on thickness of the clays, the depth to the clays, and obviously the lower the stripping ratio, the better. And if we're close to the granites, that's probably not a bad thing either. So for us, we're now flying a AEM survey over this area and also grass patch at the moment at 400 metre spacings rather than 20 kilometre spacings that you can see there. And that's going to generate a lot of targets for us. But it's also going to give us a 3D model effectively that will show us the clay thicknesses throughout these areas. Now, it doesn't tell us our grade or recoveries or anything else like that, but it tells us there's clays there and it's close to surface. Next slide, please. So in terms of our program, we only listed recently on the ASX, so June this year we listed. There's been a bit of a rush into the Esperance area for these clay rare earths. We're one of about 3 or 4 in there now, and we're seeing that we're all starting to work together on that. So we've just completed our drilling program. Assays are due shortly, as I mentioned. The geophysics and clay mapping is actually occurring as we speak, with the aeromag happening overhead. And then once we've got the assays coming in, we'll be selecting various high-grade areas, and also areas that we think we're going to get good metallurgical recoveries on. Put them into ANSTO as the key metallurgical program, so Australian Nuclear Science Organisation. That's been doing a lot of these clay-based and other rare earth programs, both in Australia and around the world. And we'll work on that metallurgical test works and just make sure where the best areas are. Generally, rare earths, you're only getting about 50 to 70% recoveries. My background's metallurgy, so I'm not a geologist. I'm also a project developer, so I'm here to see what the end goal is in terms of actually building something. And we need to make sure that metallurgical test work is probably done as best we can, and is what's going to drive the project. We'll look to put an exploration target out early next year, get into a whole heap of res dev and infill drilling to get a mineral resource estimate probably during next year out, and then scoping study obviously with that as well. And the blue parts are our grass patch project, which we're going to be doing some drilling and clay mapping obviously at the same time. Next slide, please. So corporate structure, we're pretty simple. We listed at 20 cents. It's obviously been a bit of a choppy market, but we're back above 20 cents at the moment. 100 million shares on offer, 7 million in the bank as at the end of last quarter. So enterprise value is sitting about 13 million. A lot of the peers in this clay space sort of market caps of 30 to 40 million dollars based on similar stages as us. So I really see a bit of a re-rating happening on some positive drill results coming forward. Directors, founders obviously got skin in the game. I've got skin in the game. So we're here to make this work. Final slide, please. So a summary, there has been an explosion in demand on critical rare earths coming from electric vehicles, from wind turbines, also other things like consumer goods like air conditioners. We do have thick, and not just 3 metres, we got up to 30 metres, and I think we'll see even thicker intercepts of clays with good grades in there, near to surface, and it's clay hosted. So we don't have to have the beneficiation plants. So we don't have the same grades as some of the hard rocks, but we don't have the same capital and operating costs as some of those hard rocks either. The geophysics is going to obviously tell us a lot of the areas to go target, the depth and thickness across all of our granted tenements. And we've got a real big potential here, not just for tens or millions of tonnes, it's hundreds of millions of tonnes. If you look over 30 by 60 kilometre target areas and narrowing those down. And we saw a cross section there of 30 kilometres worth of intersection there. And our close proximity to an existing port that's already shipping out iron ore, shipping out wheat grain, and also an existing town with roads gives us a big tick in the box there, so low capital. And finally, green rare earth potential using wind turbines, solar panels, and other things. So that's the presentation in 10 minutes.
Very well done, Brett. Thank you so much for that. We've had a couple of questions come through, so let me get into them. And I know you have mentioned this, you do have quite a large project as it stands. And I know that there's quite a few companies that are coming on and acquiring some of the adjoining land. But is there an opportunity for you to sort of increase the tenement package that you have?
There's always an opportunity. I think the question is, why would you do it if you've already got a big package and the grades that we've already seen there? So yes, there's an opportunity, but I think we'll find that we've got a couple of 100 million tonnes, and that's my, you can look at that on the ASX, 250 million tonnes at 800 plus ppm is one of my goals to reach. So at the moment, I think we'll just focus on our knitting at the moment.
And just a bit of a forward sort of looking question, but what excites you most about the project?
Look, rare earths is a bit of a boom, so it's a bit of a laggard behind the lithium story. So lithium obviously needs to go into all these, it's a bit of white gold at the moment, but into all this decarbonisation side of things. So for us, you need these high magnetic rare earth magnets that then drive the efficiencies of these electric vehicles to go a lot further on the road. So I've just bought myself a Tesla as well. So I'm going to get 400 plus kilometres out of it based on having these rare earth magnets in there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for the update. And I look forward to seeing the drill results that are coming out next week.
Beautiful. And they'll be progressive over probably a month's time. So we'll get our initial results, and then obviously over the next 3 or 4 weeks will be the full results coming out.
Brilliant. Well, I would encourage webinar attendees to reach out via the contact details on the bottom of the ASX releases if they've got any further questions. But thanks so much for your time. So next up, we have a presentation from Nimy Resources with the ticker code NIM, a company focused on nickel sulfides in Western Australia. To tell us more, I will hand you over to the non-executive chairman, Simon Lill. Good afternoon, Simon.
Yes, well, it's actually good morning where I am, but nonetheless, good afternoon to you. So, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Let me just bring up your presentation.
Yep.
When you're ready.
Okay, so look, we'll just skip through the first couple of slides. Nimy Resources is operating, looking for nickel, which is one of the other battery metals. It doesn't seem to get as much press at the moment as lithium and rare earths seem to be the two popular ones. We will touch on rare earths later on, but nickel is certainly the BHPs of the world. The Forest Group have been chasing nickel as well, and it is forecast to be in very short supply over the next 10 years. And I think in a difficult market overnight, nickel was one commodity that actually went up last night, and it's at its highest level for 6 weeks, I think I saw. So the Nimy project, we're 370 kilometres to the northeast of Perth in the Yilgarn Craton. We've got an 80-kilometre contiguous set of tenements and a fairly large land holding, 2,500 square kilometres in this area in the Yilgarn Craton. One of the reasons that I was attracted to this project, I've been very fortunate. I'm chairman of De Grey Mining, which has had a very large discovery, gold discovery in the Pilbara Craton, up in near Port Hedland. And we used to promote De Grey that the Pilbara Craton was the same as the Yilgarn Craton, same aged rocks, same greenstone belt, same structures. And really the argument was, why wouldn't there be gold as there is in the Yilgarn Craton, and indeed other commodities? And De Grey did, with great fortune, has uncovered one of the largest gold discoveries for 30 years probably around the world, up in the Pilbara Craton. And I had, since that time, we've had Chalice has discovered Julimar, and the Irahidi zinc project is also very significant. So there's 3 massive, large projects, new projects in WA, discovered where people would not have expected to have necessarily found them. And that's what I see here with Nimy. We are in the Yilgarn Craton in an underexplored area. You could argue underexplored means there's no mineralisation there, i.e. that the old timers didn't find it. We have done enough work so far to find that underexplored means underexplored, and we've got a lot of work to do because of the number of targets that we do have. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I should have actually mentioned this in the last slide. So the Nimy exploration, we're on a structural trend that runs from you and me, the gold mine, to the north, all the way down to the Forestania nickel project to the south. So we're on that same geological structural trend. What we're showing here is a gossinous rock. We have discovered a gossin, oddly, when we were digging a sump for a drill program. Now, gossins, when the Cambolda nickel discoveries were found, there were gossins around Cambolda. They weren't necessarily what led them to the nickel discovery, but they were there. Similarly at Forestania, they have got gossins throughout that nickel area there. So to get a gossin in an area that is nickel, is fertile for nickel sulfides, is quite exciting. And we are actually looking for further gossins in the area as well. We have now drilled this gossin, and you can see diamond hole number 5 there. And this was quite shallow. So it's returned nickel up to 0.48% through that gossin. Now, 0.48% is not necessarily getting you excited, but it's at the top end of that gossin. So as it gets down out of the weathered zone into the fresh rock, we would hope that that level should be seen to increase. So we're hoping that the gossin will lead us to high-grade massive sulfides in that region. As you can see, so other intersections. So we had 1 metre at 0.48% nickel, 6 metres at 0.31% nickel, and other intersections as we show there. Once we'd got through the Gossan, we then had 226 metres of nickel sulfides at 0.16% nickel to the bottom of the hole. Now, the next slide will show that, but I'll keep on this slide for a tick. So 0.16% nickel is not necessarily exciting people and turning the dial, but it is a large intersection. It proves that the region is fertile for nickel sulfides. And I will note that eventually, at some stage, the demand of nickel might be such that maybe 0.16% does become an economic number, particularly with the quantity at that sort of grade that we have discovered to date. Not that we've been looking for that grade, but I guess if I go back into gold as an example, who would have thought that we'd be mining 1 gram per tonne profitably and less than that? Certainly 30 years ago, they weren't interested in 1 gram per tonne gold. So who's to say that 0.16% in quantity can't be mined? And in fact, Australia's largest gold mine is Boddington, and they're mining at 0.4 grams per tonne of gold. So 0.16%, look, it's not what we are chasing, but it is there. So we go to the next slide, please. So again, just to keep showing that we are in a very large nickel sulfide system, the map on the right has shown a number of historical intersections, and you can work your way through that as required. So there has been work obviously done in the area. We started to do some RC holes back in 2020, late 2020 for it. But more recently, diamond holes, as you can see, one of our prospects, the Godley prospect, 363 metres at 0.14%, 426 metres at 0.14%. I make the same comments as I just did. The grades themselves aren't exciting, but they are massive intersections, and it continues to prove that we are fertile for nickel sulfides there. The Dease prospect, similarly, you can see those grades and assays pending on a couple of those holes. I'm not sure whether we've released those yet or not, but we are expecting, we've been using an XRF gun across these as we've been drilling them. So we're expecting similar sorts of numbers to what we've got at Godley or above there. So we are in a massive nickel sulfide, fertile nickel sulfide system. We're showing that it's got komatiites in there. A komatiite is less known in the nickel world than it used to be, but examples of komatiites in Western Australia are Mount Keith and Yakabindi. They've been operating for 30 plus years. My understanding is, whilst they've had some higher grades here and there, their average grade's about 0.6% nickel, and they are doing fine. So we're looking for 3 different types of deposit. We're certainly looking for the massive nickel sulfides where the nickel has been trapped amidst this fertile nickel sulfide region. We're also following up the komatiites, and I certainly won't say that it's second prize, but large tonnages of komatiites at sort of the 0.6 to 1% nickel is a pretty good result. And we're certainly going to have large quantities of the lower grade nickel. Again, I will note we're not specifically chasing that. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So really, this is a summary. We have the tenement package is 100% owned by Nimy. We've got all heritage agreements in place. We've done a lot of geophysics. There's a lot of new areas that we need to understand better and look at new targets, etc. So there will be more targets other than, I guess I call it the home set of tenements, where we've had 30 targets, and that's where our executive director has been following through. So there are a number of different targets through here. So a lot of potential for, as we say in that last bullet point, large homogeneous grade targets and high grade nickel sulfide targets. I would just like to point out, and I said I'd just touch on rare earths earlier on in my presentation. Zone F there that you can see in that slide, immediately beneath that there's a cylindrical object. That is a carbonatite, and it has had very little work done on it. Linus and their rare earths project, that is within a carbonatite at Mount Weld. Mount Weld is a carbonatite. In recent days, WA1 has identified a carbonatite that is enriched with niobium and rare earths, which is consistent with carbonatites. So we have a carbonatite. Not every carbonatite will have mineralisation. That is true. But they do have some consistency if they do have mineralisation. And rare earths, niobium, tantalum, phosphate, these are the types of materials you might find in a carbonatite. So whilst we're looking for nickel, there are certainly plenty of indications of other commodities, gold, lithium, rare earths, across our tenement package as well in what is a newly identified greenstone belt. So I think that's about my time, I would imagine.
Thank you, Simon, for the presentation. A couple of questions have come through. So with the current global environment, where do you see the nickel market going in the future?
It's not something I'm not a nickel market expert, but if you say that an Elon Musk is a nickel market expert, he certainly sees it increasing in demand. And if you say that Andrew Forrest and his group and BHP and know what they're talking about, they are chasing nickel projects, and that was shown by a bidding war that they had. I can't quite grab the project's name over in Canada, but they are looking for nickel as much as they are any of the other commodities. I always liken it, a good nickel find is always like a good gold find. Nickel's a different commodity, but a good nickel discovery always gets the market excited.
No, I totally agree with you.
Sorry, I did change my camera then. My apologies.
That's okay. And just finally, I know you've mentioned that there's quite a few targets. You've got, I think it was 30 odd targets, and you're obviously doing a little bit more work to build on those. What other kind of news flow can shareholders look forward to over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yes, look, we recently appointed a geologist. Geological, we are all about exploration. We did lose a geologist, and in the market in Western Australia, geologists are remaining in demand and they get poached, etc., etc. So we have appointed a new geologist in the last couple of months who's working out the targets, etc., and he's putting together a new drilling program. We are certainly, we'll be drilling at that Gossan level. That's quite exciting. We're going to drill at the carbonatite. There could be quite a bit of excitement about that. And we've just got to keep looking at the higher grade materials that we've already identified as well in the area. So look, as an exploration company, your job is to explore, and we certainly plan to keep doing that. I did note with the previous gentleman, there are still delays in this area. The assay labs are still struggling, and you'd like to drill and get the results quickly. Unfortunately, at the moment in this world, it's not happening. But yeah, we will be back with, I think, an RC rig in the next month or so up there. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the great presentation, and we look forward to seeing further updates from the company.
Okay, thank you very much. All right.
So next up, we have a presentation from Tombola Gold with the ticker code TBA, a near-term gold producer with its first gold pour and cash flow expected this year. To tell us more, I'm joined by the chairman and MD, Byron Miles.
Thanks very much, Jane.
I'll bring up your presentation.
Cheers. Next slide. So when we took this company over 8 months ago, we completely reconfigured the board. The first thing that I did up there was I wanted to find a great geologist. Rod Watt was a real asset to the company. He was in the early days of discovering Ernest Henry. They drilled sort of a dozen holes. He went up there and he drilled out their PFS, so he knows the lay of the land very well, and it was a big asset to get him on board. Trevor Coombs only originally come on board. It was a natural progression as we're moving from a junior explorer into a miner. He has an extensive experience in being a mining engineer. Myself, I've been a specialist in markets for the last 15 years. I'm a big supporter of the company. I've taken part in all the placements. So I've got my own money invested heavily into the stock, and I've supported it on market at all times. Next slide. As you can see here, we've got a little over 1 billion shares on issue. Our market cap's $34 million, and we've currently got $1.8 million in the bank as of September. Since I came on the board, we've turned over nearly 1 billion shares on the register, so it's changed quite significantly. You'll notice there that for a market cap, circa $30 million, we've got the likes of Ausbil, Terra Capital, big high net worth family offices like Awella who've supported the stock in each raise and continue to support the stock. So we're very fortunate to have a very strong register. Next slide, please. We have 2 projects. The one that we're getting up and running right now and that we're going to talk about predominantly is up in Cloncurry, which will be a gold producer this year. We're turning the plan on later this month, but we also have a very unique suite of assets down in South Australia, which is 6,500 square kilometres. Rod Watt also worked underground there for Olympic Dam, so he knows the geology very well down there, and we're very excited about the tenure we have. But first and foremost, we have to get into gold production in Cloncurry, and then we'll go down and drill out our stuff in South Australia later next year. Next slide. So to give you an idea, we've made a few large advancements this year. When we first took over the company, we were going to be a vat leach operation, but we had an opportunity to buy the Lorena CIP plant. We bought it for a great price of $7.3 million, which was less than a fifth of the value of replacement cost. And what that's allowed us to do is to create a processing hub in Cloncurry, and it also saved us capex in other areas, but I'll talk about that a little later. When I first came on board, I said I'd pour a gold bar this year. So to do that, we've rented the Great Australian Mill. We've rented that until the 1st of March. We're looking to put 90,000 tonnes through that plant, and it's going to give us extensive cash flow, which is going to put us in a very strong cash position between now and March to allow us to achieve all of our plans in 2023. As you'll see, we've also increased our JORC compliant resources to nearly 200,000 tonnes via the acquisition of the True North tenements of 72,000 ounces of measured resource, which is less than 20 kilometres away from the CIP plant, Lorena plant, which we purchased. Our team up at Tombola is mining substantially well, and that's indicated by we're 20% ahead of schedule with 61,000 tonnes of material on the ROM pad at the moment. That's much higher than that actually states now. So we're pretty excited, and we're on track to have our 90,000 tonnes, which we're looking to put through the GAM processing plant between now and the start of March. Also this year, we had some very exciting discoveries in Little Duke and Mount Shearlight. Little Duke is high grade, which is right near our other pits, so that can easily, we'll definitely bring that into JORC compliant resource this year, and that'll extend our life of mine. And Mount Shearlight's really exciting because that's where we believe something much bigger is, and the opportunity lies there, which we'll be drilling this year too once we become cash flow positive. Next slide, please. We started haulage over the last couple of weeks to move our stuff from our ROM pad to the Great Australian Mine, just showing progression that we've made in a very short period of time. Obviously, COVID this year, everything makes it just a little bit more difficult, but we have a phenomenal team at Tombola, and it's a real credit to how well they're mining up there. Next slide. These are the 2 pits which we're mining simultaneously, which is allowing us to only use 1 fleet, and having the capabilities to mine 20% ahead of schedule is a real credit to them, as I mentioned. The GAM crushing circuits to your top right and to your bottom left are the vats, which we've optimized now, and we'll be bringing them into production early next year. Next slide, please, Jane. So everything we've done this year, and we've done a lot, has put us in a really special, unique position for 2023. I think it's going to be a company-making year for Tombola. As I stated, we're going to have cash flow. We turn on the GAM plant at the end of this month, and we'll pour our first gold bar this year. We're going to have substantial cash flow. From that, it's going to allow us to bring the vats into production early next year. So there's going to be continuity of gold supply, and then Lorena will kick into play. Now, to put it into perspective, we were only doing vats when I first took over the project, but the middle of next year, we'll actually have 2 processing operations, which gives us the capabilities to take advantage of and minimize our all-in sustaining costs where we can. Next slide, please, Jane. This slide basically just shows our continuity gold supply. As you can see, the GAM plant turns on this month. It finishes in March. From there, the vat leach will kick into play, and you'll see Lorena to start our second operation to work concurrently with the vats sort of late June moving forward. Next slide, please, Jane. I just discussed this one. We could probably skip over this one, Jane. It's just obviously more background as to what we paid. And this is the vat leach operation, which was half built when I already got to the site. It has a very low all-in sustaining cost. As you can see, all the civil construction side of things have been built there. We simply, at the moment, we have to make an order for the plastic to line that first vat. That will turn up in January, and then we'll complete the construction of this project. Next slide, please. Now, this Larina was a really unique opportunity for us. When I first came onto Tombola, I made an offer to purchase it, almost at double the price that I paid for it now. However, we managed to negotiate pretty substantially to buy it for 7.3 million. 5 million of that was vendor financed until the March next year. But what this has really allowed us to do is allowed to treat gold and copper operations. With a vat leach, you can only really treat oxide gold projects, which basically because the cyanide attaches to any copper that gets put in there first, whereas this CIL process, it allows us to float the copper off and has allowed me to take advantage to create a processing hub and buy cheap ounces up there, which we can monetize. Next slide, please, Jane. This acquisition was only made possible because we bought the Larina project. As you can see there, it's only 20 k's away from Larina. We bought this for approximately $3 million. It's got 72,000 ounces of measured and indicated resource that the previous owners had spent quite a lot of money on. They pivoted to copper, so they unloaded some of their gold assets, and we have an opportunity here. It's added 72,000 ounces to our resource, so it's quite a substantial increase, and we can monetize this at a very, very rapid rate. It's on mining leases, it's fully approved, and as I said, it's very close to our processing facility. So it was a big acquisition for Tombola. Next slide. This was a scoping study which was done in July 2021. This scoping study was only done on the VATs, but it just gives you a quick indication as to sort of the cash flows that we can produce. $160 million over 5 years mine life with nearly $80 million profit. As you'll see, that's done on a $2,285 per ounce gold price. Gold price at the moment, even though it has come off this year, is still substantially higher than that. And we've also added the Larina project, which gives us the opportunity to produce more gold. So I would like to think that we can do better than this. And we're excited to see what that can be improved to in the near future. Next slide, please, Jane. We've already touched on this one. We've basically increased our resource, but some of the explorations targets that we've had are pretty substantial, but we'll talk about them over the next two slides. Next slide. Now, as you'll see, some of these drill intercepts are pretty phenomenal. 19 meters at 3.5 grams, 18 meters at 5 grams. Now, this was all from Mount Shearlight that you can see in the top left-hand side of your page. We're currently mining Comstock and Shamrock, so you can see it's circa 700 meters away. We've tested 150 meters of this mineralization, and the strike is approximately 700 meters to the north. We'll continue to test this, and at the moment, we've still got results pending from it, and we'll be looking to bring this into our JORC compliant resource in 2023. But this is a good slide to talk a little bit about what I guess myself and Rob got excited about. As you'll see, there's several deposits up there, and a lot of those deposits are oxide gold. But if you think of them as the legs of a spider, we've been searching to see where the body of the spider is, i.e. where's the fluid source which is feeding all these deposits. And early this year at Little Duke on the right-hand side of the screen is where we hit massive sulfides. Next slide, please, Jane. So as you see, as we announced, we had 170 meters of massive mineralization, some of them being massive sulfides, circa 121 meters at 0.1 gram gold and 0.2 copper, with 68 meters at 1.5 gram gold and 0.5% copper. The really exciting component about this is where we believe is the feeder source, a much bigger system. Next slide, please, Jane. This is a 3D model of what we hit here. And as I said, once we get cash flow positive, we're going to be in a very unique situation where we've got phenomenal targets that we can produce, but we're going to be self-funded to be able to take full evaluation of these hopefully without further dilution moving forward. Next slide. So the reason why we think that this is the much larger play here is it's highly brecciated, it's massive sulfides, it's coming from a much bigger system and a much bigger fluidization, which is feeding these smaller zones. And as soon as we get cash in the bank from our production of our GAN plant, we'll be sending drill rigs up there to have an extensive drill program, which will give us constant news flow and hopefully expand this resource. We think this resource is very, very similar to well, has the same mineralization, has the same characteristics as Eloise, which AIC own at the moment. That deposit there is a kilometre deep and has been mining for the last 10 years. So to say we're very excited to try and uncover what exactly is happening there is an understatement. Next slide, please, Jane. We've done some IP, as you can see, some large conducting shapes are appearing there. This will be coming out to market once this is fully correlated, but it's shown some very great targets, and once again proving our theory right that Little Duke is good. Well, could be the fluid, could be the key to the fluidization to the fluid source, which is to a much bigger deposit. Next slide, please. Just touching back once again on our South Australian asset, it's 6,500 square kilometres. It's high tenure. It's in a great neighbourhood, as you can see, with Olympic Dam and Carpentaria. Once we become cash flow positive, we'll send a drill rig down there to really start unlocking potential. At the moment, the market's giving us zero value on this, so it would take very little result to try and start adding some value to our market cap and for our shareholders. Next slide. This is just the highlights. As you can see, we've been extensively busy, and we've put Tombola in a really good position to have a massive 2023. We've got imminent gold production starting at the end of this month. We've got continuity gold supply with both the VATs and Larina kicking into play. We'll have 2 operating mines instead of just one, which to do in a very short period of time is a testament to the Tombola team. The binding term sheet, which has been done with True North, has added substantial ounces through acquisition. And as mentioned, with our exploration, we've got 2 phenomenal targets there, which can add easy JORC compliant resources, extend our life of mine, and move forward for Tombola. We've been in various negotiations with debt facilities, and obviously there's been a fair bit of interest in forward purchasing our gold. As everyone knows out there, there's $10 trillion worth of physical gold in the world, but there's $300 trillion worth of paper gold. So at the moment, people are paying $30 to $50 an ounce premium to get their hands on physical gold, to allow them to obviously to forward trade their paper gold themselves. We've got all our core infrastructure in place across the majority of our assets. We're moving forward. We'll be pouring our first gold bar, and we'll be taking that very exciting step forward of going from a junior explorer into a gold producer in less than 12 months. And that's it. Thanks very much for everyone's time, and thanks very much for everyone's support.
Thank you, Byron. Great presentation as always. Quite a few questions in, so let's jump into them. So when do you expect the other True North projects to be converted to JORC resources, which will obviously add further ounces to the inventory?
The 72,000 ounces are JORC compliant resource. They're measured, so they've had a lot of money spent on them. They're very well defined. There is other resources in there at the moment which aren't JORC compliant, which is also very exciting. So for very minimal capital, we can go and bring them up to our JORC compliant resource and expand us once again. But until we do that, obviously I can't announce that to market until it is JORC compliant. But yes, the 72,000 ounces are full JORC compliant at the moment.
And also, so when are we likely to know the all-in sustaining costs for gold production?
The all-in sustaining costs across our projects are pretty exciting. Obviously, the VATs are the cheapest. The best way that you can really give the market a good definition of the all-in sustaining cost is obviously when you do your reconcile of your plant, which is, i.e., after a month's production through the GAM plant, we put this many tons through, we've received this many ounces, and we're basically excited to announce that to market. We have done all the work in-house, and we're very excited the profitability that the next 3 months will show.
Thank you, Byron. You also talked about the cash flow from the gold production will be financing the exploration. So what will be the exploration focus, for 2023?
The exploration focus will be obviously adding very cheap ounces, which is the JORC compliant resource that we've identified at Mount Sheolite. That's oxide gold. It's shallow. It's very similar to Mount Sheolite, which we're mining now. But as we said, and what the stock, when it ripped up to 6 cents, was on the back of that Mount Sheolite result. We've done a lot more work on it, and it needs a lot more drilling, but we really believe that's where a much bigger source is, where we can find a company defining deposit, which is, where I'm very excited to get the drill rig back down there very quickly.
Thank you, Brian. Time for just one more. So with Larina acting as a processing hub, is there a possibility to undertake processing for other companies in the region for a fee, of course, but is there a possibility?
Absolutely. Where we can not only process other people's ore, but it also allows us to take opportunities to buy cheap ounces to increase our JORC compliant resource, because we're the only processing facility there which has capacity in the area. So as everyone's seen up there, AIC made a bid for Metallica. There's a lot of consolidation starting to happening in Cloncurry, and having Lorena is a real asset to us. I didn't mention earlier, another good component of Lorena is that its gold room and its elution circuit has a large capacity, which will also allow us to not have to put a gold room at the VAT, saving us circa $2 million in a 13-month wait. So it was a really pivotal move for Tombola Gold, and it's really set us up for a very, very exciting 2023.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us, Byron. A great presentation as always, and we look forward to further updates.
Thanks for having me, Jane. Bye.
And thank you all for joining us today. So recordings of today's presentations will be available online in the coming days on both brokerbriefing.com and YouTube. We look forward to hosting you again soon.